Welcome to the Mental Health Multiverse.
We're your hosts,
HB
and LB.
We'll be breaking down some of our favorite movies and TV shows as they relate to mental health, self-healing, and overall wellness, while also breaking stigmas, shedding light on misinterpretations, and helping you understand yourself a little better.
If you're also on a healing journey and enjoy pop culture, stick around.
Today, we are talking about Rapunzel from the movie Tangled and how her character can be empowering, validating, and inspiring to viewers.
Yes, and we will be talking about some emotional and mental abuse. So if that feels too heavy for you right now, totally understandable, and that's okay. Feel free to skip this episode until you're ready.
Yeah. It's a heavy episode today, I think.
It is. It's okay. I don't even know where to begin with this. I'll just start by saying I love Tangled. I love the movie. Even though its themes are a little dark, that is what was so validating for me and inspiring and empowering, because this is the first time, I think, at least for me, this movie came out in 2010. I was a sophomore in high school, and this was the first piece of media that I had witnessed that really touched on this kind of dynamic between a parent and child, specifically mother-daughter, which is where a lot of my wounds are. Aside from all of that, Rapunzel as a princess is in my top 3 for sure, a close second to Mulan. And if you listened to our Mulan episode a few episodes ago, you know how much I love Mulan. And so Rapunzel is a close second, mainly because of how validating the movie is and how inspiring Rapunzel is, despite maybe a little bit of her why am I blanking on the word?
Naivete?
Yes, thank you. I can never say that right.
Naivete.
Naivete. There are going to be themes that we are talking about that are a little heavy, that might be a little activating. So if that just doesn't feel good for you right now, that is totally understandable. And, it's okay if you don't want to listen, or if you want to listen, just take a deep breath. And maybe some of the things we are going to talk about are also validating or empowering in some kind of way, because that's also what we're here to do. Not only to talk about these things from the aspect of mental health and how these things have gotten us through tough times, but also finding those and really pulling out those empowering nuggets, not just for ourselves, but for you, the listeners, and our friends. So yeah, thanks for joining us today, and I hope I don't know. I was going to say, I hope this episode finds you well, or as well as you can be, I guess. But all in all, this movie is very fun. If you don't know, if you haven't watched Tangled, quick little synopsis. It is about a girl named Rapunzel who doesn't know that she is a lost princess because she was kidnapped when she was a baby, and is unknowingly trapped in a tower with her kidnapper. So she goes on this journey to escape and explore the world, and along the way discovers new truths about herself and the world. So I love this movie. Love.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, there's darker theme undertones. It's also, there is juxtaposition with the lightness and the brightness of the movie as well. It's evenly balanced. It's obviously, it's not a dark movie at all, by any means, but some of the themes have undertones of being dark. So
yeah, a very dark story given in such a bright, pretty colors.
Yeah, it's kind of masked as this beautiful fairy tale, and you're is it a beautiful fairy tale though?
Yeah, I think the main excuse me, I think the main theme that gets pulled out from this movie, especially by Disney, is they really associate Rapunzel with following your dreams and creativity and passion and whatever. And that's great and that's amazing. And I totally agree. And I think there's also a bigger conversation about the mother-daughter dynamic, the parent-child dynamic of gaslighting and narcissism and things like that, that are veiled behind this very cute movie and love story.
Yeah, that's the other thing. So the movie came out in 2010, like you said, November 24th, 2010. For me personally, I did not see it until 10 years later. So I was late late
That's
to the game.
so wild to me.
Yeah, I was very late to the game. And in fact, besides the viewing that we did last night, I had only ever seen it that one other time, the first time I watched it. So I've only seen this movie twice, and I keep forgetting that it's called Tangled, which I think is interesting. It's an interesting choice of a title for the film, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is because now I'm thinking about it like so far the princesses we've talked about aside from Megara, but even that movie is called Hercules and there's like a titular character whereas this is like Tangled. Although, I guess if we want to like
Yeah,
zoom out and be super meta about it, it is kind of like not just her hair, but like the web that Mother Gothel has woven to keep Rapunzel trapped and like having to untangle not just that, but her feelings towards Mother Gothel, unlearning, which we're going to be talking about a lot in this, unlearning a lot of the beliefs that she has about the world, about herself because of the things her quote unquote mother said about her, and I so in a lot of ways I'm like, yeah, Tangled is like an interesting title and I never really thought about it before you said it of like, but actually I think it's a great title than just
yeah.
Rapunzel. Also bless you.
Yeah, so I watched it for the first time in February of 2020 before we knew what was about to happen in the world. Um, I was doing my first month of Disney princess theme in Geeknasium. So that's the workout program that I have for listeners who might not know. I have a nerdy theme like workout program where all of the workouts are pop culture, fandom, that kind of thing. And I was doing my first Disney princess month and I wanted to include Rapunzel in the Disney princess workouts, but I had never seen it before. So I decided to watch Tangled just to become familiar with the characters, I should say. And
Mhm.
I loved it. I loved it. I think like the thing I love about Rapunzel the most is just like, I don't know, she's a little bit awkward. She's a little bit like, she's not so prim and pristine and put together. Although I don't think she's quite as awkward as someone would be if they were raised in a tower, but that's not necessarily a discussion we need to have. I'm like, if you were raised in a tower and the only human you interacted with was that one narcissistic parent, I don't know that you'd be as
As sweet and
intelligent.
intelligent
Yeah.
and charming and compassionate like
Yeah. But I guess she also had Pascal, so there's that. But anyway, so yeah,
yeah.
that's my first experience with Rapunzel. I did really like it. I felt like I could relate to her on a like personality level because I feel like of all of the princesses that we've sort of talked about, I mean, like obviously Moana is the one that I'm like, yes, I relate to her so much. But like in terms of like personality, I'm like, am I a little more like Rapunzel? I'm not sure. Again, I've only seen it twice, so I'm like, I'm not sure. But I do love that she's a little bit quirky. Um, and later, much, much later in the season, we'll talk about Elsa and Anna. She gives me big Anna vibes, right? Like not afraid to like just be a little different, be a little weird, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And fun fact that I think we talked about last night, but for people who may not know, one, Rapunzel has a little cameo. Rapunzel and Eugene both have a little cameo in Frozen, the first one, and they're attending Elsa's coronation. And so there are theories that they are related, they may be cousins, which would be kind of cool. And also that Hans, the villain in Frozen, is related to the two thugs in Tangled. And I don't remember their names off the top of my head, but mainly people are just thinking that because of the red hair and the the very signature sideburns. So anyway, little fun fact for you there. Don't know if it's true, but there is that cameo. So if you rewatch the movie, yeah. Anyway, for me, I actually don't know the first time I watched Rapunzel, mainly because it is like a staple for me. When I'm watching Disney and I don't know what to put on, usually Tangled is one of the first. Also because like the first song is all about her doing chores and getting ready, and so that's like really motivating for me. I don't think I saw it in theaters. And if I did, I would have seen it with my mom, and if that's what happened, that would have been a great thing to remember, but I don't, or maybe it's because I saw it with my mom that I've blocked it out because Yeah.
Mm.
Awkward. But again, I know that like for a really long time when this was on digital, I had it on my iTunes, on my laptop on iTunes, and I'd play it all the time. It was like my go-to sick movie. Like whenever I didn't feel well, I'd put that movie on whenever I was doing homework or just like needed something in the background. I had this movie on. So I can't say that there was a lot of new things that stood out to me this last watch through, but maybe this conversation will change that. It did make me cry. Not just the first time, or maybe the first time, but the first couple times I watched it, maybe for like a year, every time I watched it, I cried because I felt so seen and validated in a way that I had never felt before. Like I mentioned, I was a sophomore in high school, and up until that point, I didn't really have any way to explain the way my mom treated me and why it hurt so much. But I finally, with this movie, had something to point to and reference when I was trying to explain it. Um, because it is so hard to explain not just emotional abuse, but like childhood emotional and mental abuse because it is so covert and it's not as like quote unquote obvious, I guess. Like whenever I would say something or like try to like confide in a friend about it, they'd be like, oh yeah, my mom's such a bitch too. And I'm like, it's not just her, not letting me have my way if like I couldn't go out or something. And it's not just her being a bitch. It's like there's so much more to that. Or like, yeah, my mom yells at me too. Or yeah, my mom like, is always telling me to do chores. And I'm like, that's not quite it. So anyway, when this movie came out, I was like, oh my God, this is it. Like the undermining comments, the gaslighting, the you know, just like the constant manipulation and power dynamic or whatever, where like in order for her to control me, she had to feel like I was less than or make me feel like I was less than so that I wouldn't talk back, so that I wouldn't set boundaries or, advocate for my own needs and things like that. Which is all things we're gonna get into, I'm sure, in this episode. But um yeah, so that's my personal experience with Rapunzel, with the movie. This movie is so precious to me. What I like about Rapunzel though is that she's a very empowered princess because to me, like even if Flynn hadn't come along, I think she would have gone anyway. She would have escaped and she would have at least tried, to explore the world that she's been curious about for so long. But I think Flynn just kind of gave her the opportunity to leave. I think Rapunzel is very creative. She's very clever. She's very brave. She's also so smart and intelligent. Um, very self-taught, which is another thing that I related to her on because I was never really like taught things by my parents, and it was like me trying to figure things out. Like I taught myself how to rollerblade and I taught myself kind of how to swim. Um and at first play piano, but then my mom actually put me in lessons and that made things a little bit easier. But yeah, my little spiel about why I love Rapunzel in the movie. And
Yeah, I think like what you bring up about being self-taught too is like that the things that her mom taught her were not necessarily true either, which is
right.
tough. Um, like when Eugene shows up in the tower, she like checks his teeth to make sure that they're not sharp because her mom teaches her that men have like sharp teeth. That's like one of the first things she does is she like after she knocks him out with a frying
With
pan,
the frying pan.
she checks his teeth and she's like, "Oh," like has like a little reaction because they're not sharp like her mom had told her. Like the men have the sharp teeth and
No, totally. Yeah. So much of what she's been taught is to be afraid of the world. And I think it's really that's why one of the lines at the end of the movie when she's like, I'm not scared anymore. It's just so oh, it's so powerful and like it makes me tear up every time I think about it because there's so much power and liberation and freedom in not letting the things you were conditioned to believe hold you back, which is so hard to unlearn. And that's something we were talking about last night and we're obviously going to talk about today is just like the unlearning of deeply rooted things and beliefs, how tricky that can be to navigate. And sometimes it's not as easy as like, oh, finding out you're actually the lost princess and you have parents that love and care and want to support you.
Yeah. So it's a big leap. Big, very, very different. Very
Yeah. Yeah.
life changing. Life altering.
Truly, yeah. But as we're talking about themes, I don't know if you had anything else, but to me, funny enough, because we talked about this in our intro, mindful escapism is actually a theme I didn't notice before. So I lied at the beginning when I said nothing really, nothing new stood out to me because it was something. Um, the very beginning song, When Will My Life Begin? She is trying to just like not fill her time necessarily, but there is a world outside that she wants to explore and she can't, so she is doing all these other things like cleaning or reading books or something.
That was not something that I necessarily picked up on. I mean, like mindful escapism for me is a little bit in everything, but like
Mhm.
as a theme, it does make sense in the context of this movie because she is very much like, there is something bigger out there for me, but I don't necessarily have control over making that thing happen. Um, and so she's thinking about it happening. It's kind of like just like what it feels like to have an unattainable goal or an unattainable dream. Sometimes too, where you're like, I don't ever know how I'm going to get there. I know that it's something that I really want to happen, but it feels so far away right now. But what she kind of does is she does a little bit of like manifesting, making it happen in a way, or like,
It's on her
um,
vision. It truly is on her vision board, right? Like the walls of that tower are her
yeah,
vision board.
she has kind of always been drawn to the lanterns, which makes sense because they are for her, right? Um, but given how she was raised, there's a big disconnect between reaching the lanterns and where she is right now.
Hmm.
And that I think can resonate with a lot of people when they're thinking about a certain goal that they have. Like there's often a feeling of a big disconnect between like where you are right now and where you want to be, whether it's like in life in general or specifically like in business or in fitness or in your healing journey. Like you're like, I want to be where LB
The
is right
people
now. Like
are.
I want to yeah, exactly. Um like I want to be there, but I am here and there are so many steps that it takes to get there and sometimes you don't even know what those steps are. So it is like, it is kind of her using mindful escapism to like bridge her own gap there. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, one thing that I hadn't thought about the first time I watched it, but really like kept coming up this time was just like how strong she must be to have all that hair. And the way that she handles it, like she very much like pulls people up from the bottom of the tower with her hair. Even
Hmm.
though it's with a pulley system, she must be very strong to be pulling someone up the side of a tower. And how strong her hair must be to like, she knocks Flynn out with the frying pan, uses her hair to drag him across the floor and throw him into the cupboard. Like she's very strong and I'm just like
Yeah.
kind of like I was like kind of shocked by like how I hadn't thought about that before. Just very much like wow. And not even just like with her hair but with her frying pan, which is a running joke throughout the movie that I also love, where they're like, these make great weapons, and then like
Yeah.
by the end the whole kingdom is using frying pans as a weapon. It's like amazing. But like she takes this frying pan and she's able to knock a man out with it. Like that's that it takes a great amount of strength to be able to do that. So I'm
Truly.
like, so in the Geeknasium workout actually that I created, the workout move that I do for Rapunzel is frying pan swings. So you are pretending to hold a frying pan and you whack it and then you crisscross your legs and you whack it and you crisscross your legs. So it's like a cardio. It's like a nice little cardio move. I just think like in her free time, I'm sure she had a lot of free time in this tower, but like how much of that free time was spent like in some sort of like like strength training, or like was she like training her hair? Was she like training her like was she prepared for villains to come? Because it's obviously not something that they showed, like there was no like montage or anything, but like she was ready when he came to that tower, like. And Mother Gothel's reasoning for keeping her hidden away was that people want her hair, they're going to take it from her, like
Mhm.
that's why she has to be hidden and locked away. So it's like, was she trained in self-defense? Like,
Which
is
also,
Rapunzel trained? Yeah, go
side
ahead.
note, the whole like, her being told that people are the reason why she has to stay in that tower is to keep her safe because there are people that want her hair. And the entire time I'm like, it's her. Mother Gothel is the people. She's the
Yeah,
one. And it just breaks my heart. But anyway, side note, every time I
she
watch it, I'm
is.
like, it's her. Mother Gothel is people.
Oh my God. And we will talk about this when we go into themes, but the way her Mother Gothel is always like, and now I'm the bad guy. And now I'm the bad guy. I'm like, bitch, you've been the bad guy the whole time. But anyway, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. We'll get there. But like her hair is just so
Yeah,
strong.
yeah.
So,
Back to the
and her
hair.
hair, like it's got a mind of its own. It's beautiful. It's great. And I just love like I'm like, what kind of shampoo does she use? Because like it's not breaking. I guess it's magical though. So like maybe she doesn't need any like special care.
Yeah, I'm like, drop that hair care routine. Cause yeah, I remember, watching it, and it's the scene when they're trying to escape from Max and the other guards, and she jumps off the cliff thing or whatever, and Max is like reaching toward her and like tries to take a chunk of her hair, and you see these like little baby, or like, little wisps or whatever. And I'm like, how does she not have breakage? How does she not have like brown highlights of all of the hairs that have like
it's
either
cause it's
magic,
because it's magical. That's why. Yeah.
magic. Yeah. No, I
That's
know.
where we
That
can
makes
blame.
sense, but it's
Yeah.
not very realistic because I wish my hair was like that. I shed so much. I would love to have hair, magical hair that didn't break, didn't shed, and was so
Mm-mm.
shiny. Anyway.
Too Absolutely too much work. The song where she's like, and I brush it, brush it, brush it, brush it. I'm like, yeah, that would be your
Brush
entire
and
life.
brush
Sorry
my
about it.
hair. Yeah.
Um, but anyway, so besides her hair being so strong, which I feel like we could talk about for forever, she also has like her frying pan, all that good stuff. But one thing I want to talk about with her in regards to like a fitness journey that's not necessarily traditional is how she was able to motivate everybody at the
Mm-hmm.
once they make it to the castle. Well, she does this with the ruffians too in a way, but like she's got this sort of like presence that makes people calm and comfortable and safe, and they want to share things with her. And I think that that is like, well, first of all, it says a lot about her character, but I think a lot of Disney princesses are sort of defaulted into that all animals love them and they're very caring and kind and whatever,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. We won't get into that. But what I noticed specifically in the scene when they've made it to the castle right before the lantern ceremony, and there's a bunch of music playing, and she notices that no one's dancing. So she just goes and grabs a bunch of people and starts like getting everyone to dance. And then they like dance for hours until it's like nighttime for the ceremony, the lantern ceremony to begin. And I think that that to me represented like a beautiful sort of like motivation just by like being yourself and wanting people to like have a good time, live their best life. I just thought that it was like a good example of leading by example and having people follow you because you are being authentic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense because that just reminded me of how the only kind of like quote unquote leadership she has seen has been like fear mongering, right? And like, using manipulation and fear and scare tactics to keep someone in line or to have someone follow the rules or listen to what Mother Goth has to say, right? And it's so interesting that like by that point of the movie, she has realized that like that doesn't work. And so she uses a lot of compassion and softness in a way to inspire and lead people. And I think that's also a really good like note just on maybe parenting in general, or just like I think it's a really good juxtaposition between Mother Gothel's like way of quote unquote leading and Rapunzel's is, even with the bad guys, Mother Gothel is very like conniving and manipulative and all of this stuff. And just throughout the movie, we see Rapunzel being so genuine and so sweet and authentic. And with the ruffians, she's like, this is kind of scary because these are the people that I've been told to not like be around and associate myself with, but also like you're human beings and I can see that. And at the very least I can try and talk to you human to human, and I'm no better than you. You're no like you're not she doesn't see anyone as less than or better than. She just sees everyone as equals. And I think that's a very important, if we're talking about leadership, I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. It's those people who I've talked about before who like they gatekeep certain things and they say like, you have to do it this way or you're wrong. And it's, just like her song, like I know best because I like it's sort of in this like gatekeeping sort of way instead of meeting someone where they're at, right? Like, which
Yes,
is the way that
exactly.
I do fitness is like I meet you where you are. Sure, I help find ways to challenge you. You come to me for very specific reasons. But I'm never going to make you feel less than because you're not a certified fitness professional. Because, like, why would I do that? You know? The only time I will is if someone is trying to pretend like they are a fitness professional and they're not.
Hmm.
And then you
Hmm.
have to put them in check. Like, you don't, I don't think you know what you're talking about. But,
No, and
you know,
it's just not using shame or guilt tripping as motivators to do anything, whether it is to like buy your product or your offering, or um have people listen to you. I think that's just, yeah, that's all.
you know what it really reminded me of when you just said that is like pain point marketing is like
Mm.
Mother Gothel is like
Hmm.
pain point marketing, pointing out everything that's wrong with you so that you buy the thing. Like, oh,
Totally.
you're not thin enough. Oh, you're not healthy enough. Oh, you're not like pointing out every insecurity that you have. Like that really reminds me of like pain point marketing in fitness where it's like, you know, and what pain point marketing is, for those of you who don't know, is like pointing out what people are insecure about so that they feel like they need your product so that they will no longer feel insecure.
Yeah.
That's what pain point marketing is, or like pointing out people's like pain
Yeah.
and with the hope that your product will be able to fix that pain.
Totally. And I think the key thing is exploiting the pain, because I think there are ethical and trauma informed ways to acknowledge the quote unquote pain points without exploiting them and letting that be the like, oh, you're not thin enough, so you need to join my program because I can, I'm the only thing that can get you there. Like, clearly you've tried all these other things and it didn't work. Mine is the thing. Or even with
Mhm.
like coaching, like, oh, you're stuck in these toxic patterns and you've tried all the things. Obviously, you're not doing something right. And I'm the only person who can help. Like, my product is the only thing that can help. Right. And that's gross and
Mhm.
icky. And I'm sorry if, and here's the thing too, I will say about that, because I'm very, very passionate about trauma informed and trauma aware entrepreneurship, um, and business and marketing and all that stuff. Those pain point marketing tactics we have been taught, the bro marketing, whatever you want to call it, those are things that I don't want to say that's like the norm, but those are the things we are taught. And if you're like, wait, I do that, is that bad? I'm just going to say, like, you're using the information you have and that and now that you know better, you can do better. But when we don't, kind of like Rapunzel, right? She didn't know about the world outside, and she had to learn new truths about what she had been taught. And maybe some like thoughts and ideas about the people she comes in contact with, right? Anyway, all of that to say, it's not your fault you were taught these things, because unfortunately they can be successful, right?
Yeah.
But now that I like some fellow entrepreneurs and coaches and friends of mine, we call it like second wave entrepreneurship or second wave coaching, where we are recognizing that these tactics can be unethical and they can be motivated by a lot of shame, and it feels icky both to the consumer and to the business owner, and trying to change the narrative and unlearn a lot of that. Anyway, little spiel on
Yeah.
ethical trauma informed marketing, but
Yeah, I mean, like if you go back like 5, 6 years on my page, I used to post before and after photos, like, and that's not something that I choose to do anymore because I no longer feel as though a before and after photo accurately represents any sort of journey. You're
totally.
not better in your after photo, you're not worse in your before photo. Like your life is a life to be lived. You shouldn't strive for a before and after, right? And like,
Totally.
but that was something I had to learn. Whereas when I was in the space that I was in 6 years ago, I thought but I wanted to share that because I was proud of myself for having gotten there. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you learn, you change, I don't want to say get better because I'm not going to say that what I'm doing now is like better, but it
Right.
feels better, right? For me
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
So
Totally. Exactly. That makes sense. I did not expect us to go into a little tangent about entrepreneurship and marketing, but that is a really good point. It's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
thank you. I have a couple more fitnessy points and then we can move on to healing journey. But so like there right before the lanterns go up and Flynn and Rapunzel are in the boat, she seems very on edge and he sort of asks her about it and she talks about how she's spent her whole life waiting for this dream and like what if it's not what she expected and I found that to be really relatable from a fitness perspective as well, but I think it's also just anyone who is in fear of accomplishing that goal to kind of go full circle to back to what we were talking about her manifesting in mindful
Mm-hmm.
escapism. Her
Mm-hmm.
like she felt so far away from this goal and she finally took all the steps to get there, right? And she's worried that it's not going to feel the way that she dreamed it would, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's that little self-sabotage feeling that comes in right before you accomplish a goal or when you're on your way to accomplishing a goal that's like, what if this is it? Like, what if this is all? Like, what if it doesn't feel, and Flynn says something. I don't, does he say this or did I just write this down? I'm not sure, but like, what if it works out? What if it is everything you dreamed it was going to be?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't feel how you want it to, you know, maybe the steps that you took to get there weren't weren't healthy for you or weren't the greatest for you, right? Like this didn't feel how I wanted it to feel. Um, and I think it's a good learning opportunity for you to sort of step back and be like, why, why don't I feel great for accomplishing this big goal of mine? Like, why do I feel a little sad or a little, um, unmotivated or a little, XYZ thing? And there could be tons and tons of factors, but it's definitely something to look into. But having that mindset of like, what if it works out? What if it feels great?
Mm-hmm.
Keep going.
Yeah, and I looked up the quote because I was curious too. So Rapunzel says, "What if it's not everything I dreamed it would be?" And he goes, "It will be." And she's like, "What if it is? What do I do then?" And Eugene at this point says, well, I guess that's the good part, I guess. You get to go find a new dream." And I love, I love that quote because everything
Yeah.
you're saying, I think, is so relevant, not just to like goal setting, but even like the healing journey. And I'll talk more in depth about it after you finish your fitness notes. But when we've like unlearned something and the things that we were activated by no longer have as much of an impact on us, it can feel weird. And I just want to acknowledge that weirdness and like the grief, like you were saying, when you accomplish a goal, maybe there's a little bit of sadness, there's a little bit of grief because it's like, okay, what do I do now? And in some ways, you're like kind of closing the chapter on that, or even closing the book on a certain thing. And there can be a lot of like bittersweetness that comes up. And really, all of that to say, and everything we talk about is that like it all belongs. Your feelings are so valid, like the good and the bad and the ugly. And yeah.
One other scene that I really liked that kind of goes along with this. It's relating to everything that we're going to talk about, but like the scene when she first leaves the tower for the first time, and I love this scene so much because it's like it flashes from her to being so excited for finally liberating herself to feeling so guilty and that her mother is going to hate her, and it just flashes. She goes back and forth between these two feelings of like, I am finally free, and then oh my god, she's going to kill me. I am finally like, this is amazing, and then I'm the worst daughter in the world. Like those
Mhm.
kinds of like thoughts and feelings, and I just thought it was such a beautiful representation of like unlearning and how it feels to like get out of a certain mindset or a certain headspace that you've been taught your whole life. Um, and for me, obviously, I like to relate it to diet culture or fitness in the way of like, we have been raised in a society where you're taught that like there's a moral food has a moral value and that there's a such thing as good food and bad food, and we're taught that like thin is the societal ideal and that's what everyone should be striving for, and we're taught that there's just so much that we are taught in society that relates to diet culture about the way that you should look, the way that you should eat, the way that you quote unquote should do anything. And unlearning from that has been such a hard process for me personally. And I know that it has been for a lot of my clients too, when it comes to that juxtaposing feeling of like, this is amazing. I'm no longer part of diet culture. I'm no longer sucked in. And then you see a new mad and you're like, oh, they're telling me that it's like weight loss but without tracking. How ooh, and then you get like sucked back in, or you like you're finally feeling a little more neutral about your body, and then you look at a picture and you're like, "Oh no." Like there's a
Mhm.
lot of that sort of like roller coaster feeling when you're going through the process of unlearning, and it's definitely a constant like something you need to be working on and be aware of, but the fact that you've gotten to the roller coaster point is like a step in the right direction.
Totally. Totally. Because there's a quote that I saw, and I don't know who says it, but it's essentially like, in order for things to be different, you have to do things differently.
Mhm.
And it can be so hard because you're going against so many core beliefs. You're going against a lot of narratives that are deeply, deeply, deeply ingrained. And that's the thing too, is like our brain craves what is familiar and what it knows and what fits those narratives. And so when we're trying to step outside of that and do something differently, our brain is like, we've never been here before. This is weird. This is scary. I don't know how to function. I know how to function even if it's in like a quote unquote dysfunctional environment or unhealthy environment. I know how to operate in that. So I'm going to go toward what feels familiar because this, even though it might be better for me, even though it might be health, quote unquote, healthier or quote unquote more functional or whatever label you want to put on it, even though like it might be better, I don't know that it, first of all, I don't know that it will be better. And I don't know how to operate in this way. So I'm just going to go back to what feels familiar and comfortable.
The pattern.
Pattern, exactly. And that especially after years of gaslighting, especially from a caregiver, especially like with emotional abuse, that can be so hard because you've grown up, or I don't want to say you as like the royal you. I'll just talk about myself, I guess. For me, it was
Mhm.
like, I spent years of my life being told certain things about myself that, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I shouldn't have ever been born, things things like that. And so that's how I showed up in the world, is like, oh, I shouldn't even take up space. Like I shouldn't even be here, and I'm going to make myself as small as possible so that I don't upset anyone, because I don't want anyone else to feel like how this person in my life who I'm supposed to be looking up to feels about me. Which is like also, side note, well, maybe not side note, kind of relevant, is like so heartbreaking about this movie. And I think just as our like society and culture at large, is how we are just supposed to respect and
Like default to
yeah, default,
authority.
exactly, default to adults just because they're adults, right? Like, oh, well, they're an adult, so they know best, or oh, they're your parent, so you have to listen to them, or, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating, and I know we're talking about a podcast, and I'm like failing to find words to talk about this, just because I that isn't fair. Like, the blind loyalty and allegiance to someone just because they're an adult, and like Mother Gothel definitely relies upon that, of like, well, first of all, I'm your caregiver, and so I know best. I mean, she has a whole fucking song about mother knows best. And manipulating and tricking Rapunzel into believing these lies, not just about the world, but about herself. But the whole thing about like sloppy and undressed, immature, clumsy, please, they'll eat you up alive. Like, that is, and everything she says to Rapunzel is under this guise of like, but it's because I love you, or it's because I'm looking out for you, and I'm trying to protect you. And that is something we hear so commonly, or at least I heard so commonly growing up, was like, no, you're not allowed to go hang out with friends, because if you go out, you might get kidnapped, or you might get killed, or just like these really big extremes, under the guise of like, we're just trying to protect you, or I'm hard on you because I care, or I hurt you because I love you. That is not love.
Well, I mean, I'll add to the song when she sort of says like the like, well, first of all, the whole song is like incredibly triggering, which I think is scary. Um everything she's pointing out on Rapunzel is like why she shouldn't leave, right? Like, you can't leave because all of these horrible things are going to happen to you. But
And yeah,
like,
and it's not even like all these horrible things are going to happen to you, but also like the next layer, the icing on the cake, is you are not good enough to go out
yeah,
there. So you need to stay
right. And
here.
she's pointing out everything that's wrong with Rapunzel specifically. And I think the most triggering line of that song for me was like, and I believe getting kind of chubby. I was like, first of all, first of all, don't put that in a Disney song. Oh my God. Second of all, with the way Rapunzel is drawn, how triggering must that be for a young child to hear? I mean, hopefully they're not
Truly.
singing Mother Gothel's song, but it's like you see this like very, very thin, character, and her mother is calling her chubby. Like,
Yeah.
come on.
I mean, at least I hope too that because it's very clear that Mother Gothel is the villain, they don't take it to heart.
Well, the other thing about that is that like that's very fat phobic. It's like it's fat phobic thinking
True.
also is
Yes.
like that chubby is bad also. So it's
Hmm,
like,
hmm,
I don't
hmm.
know. It's just it made me very upset to hear.
Yeah. Mother Gothel all around is horrible, very problematic, and it's just so not funny, not funny, haha, funny, weird, funny, not okay. It's just funny to me how like the contrast we get from like Mother Gothel, who visibly looks like a villain, like very dark, striking features, and then like cute, happy, pretty Rapunzel. She's just very bright and bubbly. And I think that is such an interesting hero villain dynamic, and not one we typically see, I think, especially in Disney movies. And the fact that, yeah, the villain is not someone who has a lot of great power, in the sense that we've seen like when I think of a traditional villain, I think of someone who's trying to rule the world, right? Or take over and overthrow whatever, so that they are always on top, and that they're in charge, and that it's all about them. And I think it's really interesting that in this sense anyway, while that is kind of true, the villain isn't trying to rule at all. She's just trying to rule and be in charge of like this one, or control this one person.
I think what you're saying is true, and then what is also true is that like villains operate from a very selfish place, whether that
Yeah.
selfish place is like ruling the world or stealing a young woman's voice or
Yeah.
staying young. Like, I think villains often operate from a place of like selfishness. Um
Very self-serving. Yeah.
and yeah, and I think it is a an interesting dynamic that like that Mother Gothel is incredibly selfish, while it seems that Rapunzel is incredibly selfless.
Yes. Yeah. Totally. To kind of relate this movie to a healing journey, I kind of want to break down some of the terms that we are using and talking about, which actually kind of relate to like our theme. So, we're talking about emotional abuse. And for anyone who isn't familiar, emotional abuse basically means intentionally scaring or humiliating, isolating, or ignoring a child, as well as making them feel, or not even just a child, just anyone, as well as making them feel inadequate and only valued in relation to how useful they are, and they aren't allowed to express their point of view because the abuser essentially like silences them by mocking them in some kind of way or like turning it around to make them seem silly, which also kind of leads into like gaslighting. And gaslighting essentially is like psychologically manipulating someone into questioning their sanity. And we definitely see that a lot with Mother Gothel, which I think is why the movie at first was so triggering. Okay, so some of the red flags with gaslighting. I guess I don't know, content warning, trigger warning. We're going to be talking about gaslighting for the next couple of minutes. So skip ahead, pause, go take a deep breath. A-okay. Some of the red flags with gaslighting include dismissing or downplaying someone's feelings in order to control them or the conversation. And we see Mother Gothel doing this with like, don't be so naive, or like you're overreacting. And those are kind of like trademark gaslight. And I know gaslighting is like a big buzzword now these days. And I don't want to, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I share this as just like education, I guess, or information, not so much like if you know, like, there's so much nuance. Like if you notice this, if someone's saying this to you, they're a gaslighter. That's not always true. And it's important to also see the nuance because sometimes we just say these things in conversation and it's important to understand someone's true motives and intention behind them. Okay, thank you. Anyway, another red flag would be that they being the abuser will deny and lie even when there's evidence. So when Rapunzel's like, no, these are lanterns, these aren't stars, and Mother Gothel like buckles down on the fact that nope, these are stars because I can't admit that these lanterns are lanterns because they are important and they are relevant to you. Also, I think I texted you this yesterday. I was like, this whole movie, this whole plot could have been avoided if Mother Gothel just told Rapunzel her birthday was on a different day. But whatever, it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I think Rapunzel still would have been drawn to the lanterns, even
This is true.
regardless.
This is a good point. Yeah. Another red flag is that the abuser will like turn it around and project onto you. So like the thing that stood out to me was when Mother Gothel comes back after she calls it a fight, and she's like, "Surprise! I got parsnips. I'm gonna make your favorite hazelnut soup." And Rapunzel's trying to be like, "Hey, I have a man in my closet. Like, see, I can totally handle myself out there." But Mother Gothel keeps shutting it down. And she's like, I hate leaving you after a fight, especially when I've done nothing wrong, like just unable to take accountability. And then the guilt tripping, which we talked about, her being like, "Great, now I'm the bad guy. Like, oh, you are making me out to be this bad person. You're making me feel bad," and just like really centering herself and her feelings to dismiss and belittle Rapunzel's. Another red flag is purposefully misinterpreting your intentions or motives, right? So the quote that stood out to me in HB, I don't know if you thought of a different point, but when after Rapunzel heals Flynn's wound on his hand, and then Mother Gothel shows up and she's like, "How did you find me?" And Mother Gothel's like, I just listened for the sound of complete and utter betrayal and followed that." As if like
Mm.
the whole time Rapunzel like was trying to was doing this to like get at or hurt her in some kind of way. Another red flag is that they will try and use other people, whether real or fake, to bolster their side. And I couldn't think of a specific line, but I want to say at some point she used Flynn to like to validate her point or whatever. I think specifically along the lines of like, he couldn't ever like you because you're so naive and childish and things like that.
Yeah, would that also be the whole he's going to leave you, give him this crown and
Mm-hmm.
prove my point? He will prove my point.
Yeah, yeah, I think that would be a good example too. Yeah. So, ultimately gaslighting is just used as an attempt to demean and confuse you. And so the encouragement I would offer is just, stand your ground, trust your gut, and speak your truth even if your voice shakes. And I have like a fun little, not fun, but I have a little guide on about this on Instagram. If you're interested, I can link it in the show notes. So those are kind of the things I would equate the movie to in terms of like a healing journey. Oh, also, can't believe I forgot about this one. Complex trauma. So there are different types of trauma, not just like big T trauma or little T trauma. Beyond that, there's like acute, which means it happens from a single event, chronic trauma, which is repeated and prolonged, um, and then complex, which is varied and there are multiple instances. And varied just means that like it's not happening all the time. And I think that kind of goes back to like, narcissistic people who will like love bomb and then treat you like crap and then love bomb and make up for it and then be like, oh, see, like they're okay. Like they didn't mean to actually do this. So they don't actually mean this or whatever. And then go back to being their horrible selves. Anyway, so I don't remember off the top of my head. I did watch the Tangled animated series and HB it gets dark. Like at some point she has to revisit the tower. She's having like flashbacks and dreams, like definitely some CPTSD for sure. And I wonder, I'll have to rewatch it because I am curious if they explore that just a little bit more. Um but anyway, we're here to talk about the healing journey in relation to this movie. And so I think for me, a lot of it comes down to healing after gaslighting or after years of chronic emotional abuse. And so here, at least in my experience with therapy and getting my certification as a coach and just consuming a lot of mental health content, here's what my encouragement would be to you. And this is kind of the journey I have been on and have helped my clients on. So I hope this is helpful for you. And it's going to be a very boiled down version, but here we go. I think one of the first steps is definitely meeting yourself where you are. HB touched on that a lot, especially in fitness, but I think it can also be relevant in healing, acknowledging where you are, what events have led you to this point, and where you would like to go. And even just taking stock of where you are, where you want to be, and the steps that it might take to get there. Along the way, rebuilding self trust, because especially when so much of what you've been told is that you are not good enough, you're not smart enough, you shouldn't trust yourself or anyone. Relearning how to do that and coming home to yourself might feel very uncomfortable and hard, but you can do it, and I believe in you. And then also part of that unlearning is acknowledging the both and, because like we saw with Rapunzel, right? It was either like I'm safe in this tower or I'm in constant danger outside in the world, or like or even the world is out to get me. In the movie, by the end, we see her unlearning that and finding a both and, like, yeah, there are bad people out there in the world who do want to use me for my hair, and there are people who want to protect me and who genuinely care about me and want to support me and help me. And I can now learn how to navigate and identify who those people are.
I also love that the people who are out to support her are the very people that she was warned to stay away from.
Truly. Oh, that's such a good point. The ruffians
Yeah.
who just absolutely adore her, and Flynn, the thief. And then so meeting yourself where you are and then breaking the cycle. It like we talked about, breaking any kind of pattern or habit or cycle isn't going to happen right away. And in order for things to be different, we do have to do things differently. And it's just choosing trying to choose differently every time, even if we fall back, kind of like that scene where Rapunzel's like, this is the best day ever. Oh my God, I'm a horrible person. That back and forth is part of the process. And it is okay. That doesn't mean you're failing. It doesn't mean you're regressing. It doesn't mean you're not healing good enough or whatever. It just means that this is part of the process. And we just keep trying. And I think that's another lesson I pull from the movie and from Rapunzel is that she tries even if it doesn't work out, even if she doesn't necessarily have a plan figured out completely, she tries. And I think that is what is important. And she also does it with a lot of like compassion. And so as we are trying on our own journeys, using a lot of curiosity and compassion, because there may be a voice that comes up that's like, see, you messed up, you shouldn't even try, or see, you can't break this habit or cycle because you're just not good enough and you are like, this is just your life and deal with it.
The negative voices in our head are sometimes quite often not our own.
Yes.
Um, and one of the things that she says that like when she's like trapped in like the water cave with Flynn and she just blames herself for them being in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and is like, "Oh my gosh, this is all my fault." Like that is not it's her automatic thought pattern, but she's able to sort of get herself out of it by being like, wait, I actually have a solution for this.
Yes. I read somewhere, I don't remember where I read it, but the first thought we usually have about something, whether it be ourselves or the world, is a thought that we were conditioned to have or a thought we were taught. And then the second thought is usually more closely aligned to our core values and our authentic self. And I think that's a really good point that at first it's habitual and it's second nature to blame ourselves or to critique ourselves for something that either didn't go well or isn't going well or whatever. And then sometimes the second thought would be like, okay, well, how would I say this? How would I console a friend about this? Or how would I speak to a friend? And then taking that and turning it toward ourselves. Because more often than not, it's a lot easier to speak kindly to someone externally because our inner critic isn't so loud because the spotlight and the focus isn't on us. So that is a really good point. And then that kind of leads into like my third thing, which is showing up for yourself just as much as you show up for everyone else. Like I said, sometimes it's easier to extend other people a lot of kindness, love, grace, and compassion. And just as much as we can do that for others, we can try and do that for ourselves. I don't want to use should, but that's kind of what I'm alluding to is I guess all I'm trying to say is like what you are able to give others or what you do give others, you are able to give to yourself. It's just going to take time and practice. But part of showing up for yourself, I think also can mean keeping small promises to yourself. Again, like going back to building self-trust, that I think that's another key component, whether it be like, you know, setting time for yourself and your self-care, or even if it's like, I'm at least going to try to do this scary thing and I don't know what's going to happen, but I know I have my back in the end, whatever happens, can also be a form of showing up for yourself and building that self trust. And then also like getting to know all of the parts of yourself, not just the parts that are easy, quote unquote, easy to love, but also the parts that might feel a little bit harder, like the parts that maybe we were told to not love or the parts that we were told aren't good enough. Lastly, it's really just like integrate, integrate, integrate. We don't know how to drive by sitting in a parked car. We learn by doing things, and even if we don't do it perfectly. So anyway, that's my little spiel about like the healing journey and healing after and self-healing and what your journey may look like, or maybe even like a framework if you're just starting out and you're like, I don't know what to do. Those would be that's kind of like my little framework for the healing journey. I think we see that a lot too with Rapunzel in acknowledging where she is, knowing where she wants to go, breaking the cycle of like the pattern of just being in the tower and then she leaves, and then showing up for herself by advocating and even acknowledging like what her dream is, right? Like, this is what I want to do and I'm going to make it happen. When she's like telling Max, she's like, this is kind of a really important day for me. So I'd appreciate if you didn't arrest my guy just yet. And then integrating. And I think they do explore that in the animated series. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly helpful for anyone who might need that. Well, I guess everyone could use it. Some might just need it more than others.
Yeah. And, wherever you're at on your journey, whether you're beginning, whether you feel like you're a seasoned self healer, overall, my encouragement would just be kind to yourself, be kinder to yourself, and move forward with a lot of curiosity and compassion. Because curiosity is a really great way to kind of hold shame and guilt at arm's length and be like, I wonder why why is this a thing? What may have happened to me in the past for me to respond in this kind of way, rather than being like, wow, I suck. Wow, this is horrible and all those kinds of things.
You don't suck.
You don't suck. You don't. Would you like to move into our favorite quotes, themes, scenes, characters?
Sure. Sure. My personal favorite quote is when she knocks out Flynn and um and she sort of like advocates for herself. I don't think anyone else is in the room with her except for Pascal, but she's like, too weak to handle myself out there? Tell that to my frying pan. Because I think it's just a really nice example of her like clapping back at her mom. And also having a bit of, like a bit of pride in her strength in herself.
Totally.
It's like step one into what is about, it's like her first step into being like, yeah, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's my favorite quote. I think the animals are my favorite character. The horse and Pascal. Max and Pascal are my favorite.
Max is fantastic.
Pascal is just so sassy. I don't know if I could name a sassier just by its little facial expressions. I mean, I was cracking up. I was like, this little chameleon is too much.
I really like how there's a running joke throughout the entire movie that Flynn has no idea what animal Pascal is. Because at one point he's like trying to convince Rapunzel to go back so he can get the crown or whatever. And he's like, here's your pan, here's your frog. Or at some point, and then she's like, or lizard, he calls him a lizard gecko or something. And she's like, chameleon. And he's like, nuance.
Yeah, I do love all the characters in Rapunzel. I think it's a very well-rounded. There's not too many characters either, which
Mm-hmm.
is kind of cool. Because I think Mother Gothel makes a great villain. I think Rapunzel makes a great princess. I think Flynn makes a great prince. I think he's very flawed in lovely ways. And because he's a thief. He's not a prince, right? Like he's a bad guy, quote
Well,
unquote. Uh,
actually, spoilers for the animated series, we find out Flynn's lineage and it's very interesting. That's all I'll
Here's
say.
the thing. That's not canon to me because I've never watched it, so I don't.
Fair. All right. All right.
Anyway.
Okay. 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 Okay.
I mean,
Anyway.
maybe it is. I don't know. I don't know how Disney canon works once you get outside of the mainstream. But anyway, he yeah, but I guess what I mean is just like he's a thief. He's a bad guy. And that he like once he allows himself to be vulnerable with her, which was the same in Hercules, like I think Disney does a really good job of showcasing the power of vulnerability, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. Like
Yeah.
um, once you're able to be vulnerable with this person, it will once they see the true real you, um, they'll appreciate you more.
Right. Like you form deeper bonds and connections with people when you are authentically yourself than when you are trying to like put on a certain persona because you think that's who they'll like more. And
Hmm.
also that's like exhausting to have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say my favorite theme throughout is the pursuit of dreams, which I don't think like we've
Mhm.
kind of touched on it a bit throughout, but it's like, there's everybody in the movie has a dream, right? And Rapunzel's comes true beyond her wildest dreams because like, her dream was just to go see the lanterns. It
Yeah,
ends with her being the lost princess, right? And like
totally.
finding her true family. But like every character sort of has a dream. Um, and I think it's just like it's a nice, it's a nice way to honor the pursuit of dreams. Like dreams can come true, which I guess is like also the theme of Cinderella, but like, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
I
it's
I
presented
do
in such a different way in this movie. Yeah.
yeah. I do like too how no one makes fun of each other's dreams, you know? Like when all the ruffians are talking about their dreams, like they want to be an interior designer or a baker, and Rapunzel just wants to see some lanterns. No one's like, that's such a stupid dream. Like you should aim higher. No, she's like, this is what I want to do, and this is good enough for me right now. And I think that's just a beautiful reminder that like you don't always have to shoot for like the big extravagant thing. Your dream can be whatever you want it to be, or the thing that you want can be, as and that's the other thing too, is like when we're talking about big or small wins or dreams or whatever, like that's all relative. And as long as it's something that you want, and go for it, go live your
Yeah.
dream.
Live your dream. Yeah. What about you? What are your favorite themes, characters, quotes?
So my favorite quote and scene are kind of all the same. It's when Rapunzel realizes she is the lost princess and she says, "You are wrong about the world and you are wrong about me." Ugh. Mm,
Mm.
mm. It's so empowering, and I can't tell you the amount of times that like when I heard that line, I would like fantasize about saying that to my mother like after I moved out and was living on my own and healing and like feeling and like rebuilding my self-esteem and my self-trust, how often I wanted to just be like, you were wrong about the world and you were wrong about me. But I haven't. I would love to at some point, but whatever is what it is. Also the
You could
line
just
of
live
just
vicariously through Rapunzel.
exactly, exactly. And also the line of just like, I'm not scared anymore. She's not scared of Mother Gothel. She's not scared of the world. She's not letting fear rule her life, because Mother Gothel definitely like used fear as a way to manipulate Rapunzel into staying in the tower and doing what she's told. Um, and not only do we know that that's not a great parenting tactic, we also know it's just like not effective. It might be effective in the short term, but there are long term results and impacts and stuff. So that's like both my favorite quote and favorite scene, because it's
In that
so
scene, is that
Mhm.
also the scene where she yells, "I will never stop," or is that
No, that's
separate?
when she's chained and Mother Gothel
Oh,
has
okay.
just stabbed Flynn.
Oh, we'll talk about that later.
We'll
Sorry,
talk
you
about
keep
that in
going.
just a second. No, really, I mean that was really it. It's just it's a very for me it was a very inspiring quote, and I think this that quote and like the movie at large can be a great way to open the conversation about this kind of covert abuse and these parent child dynamics, I think, in a way that we haven't had before. And I mean, now we have things like Encanto and Inside Out and Turning Red and all of these other movies that really touch on generational trauma. But at the time I feel like this was really, at least for me, because again, I was very limited in my like media selections, but because there was a Disney label on this one, my mom was like, yeah, sure, you can watch this one. I don't know if she ever actually watched it. Anyway, my favorite character would probably also be Max or Pascal. Not to totally copy you, but they're just they're so funny and so cute and so sassy. And Max is like, it's so funny because he, how do I say this, he is like, I don't want to say better than everyone, but like
He's the
when they're
smartest person in the movie,
truly when they're chasing Flynn or
and he's a
whatever,
horse.
and he's a horse, he when they're chasing Flynn, he like outmaneuvers Flynn or whatever. And then when they're dueling in the I want to call it a cavern. It's not a cavern. When they're in the cliff. Anyway, they're dueling. Flynn has the frying pan and the horse has a sword and he beats Flynn. And then also at the snuggling duckling, like Maximus is the only one to figure out that there's a secret lever behind the bar. Just like I love this horse
It's like
so much.
the humans are dumb. Let's let the horse do all the work.
And how much he adores Rapunzel is so cute. And he's like, okay, yeah, you're my person now, and I don't trust this Flynn guy, but we'll see. If you like him, maybe he's all right. I think that's kind of funny.
Mhm.
Oh, theme. I don't know if I have a favorite theme per se, other than, like I said, I think this movie does a great job of opening or starting the conversation around these far too common parenting dynamics, and giving like a very validating reference point to some people who may not have yet the words to explain these kinds of things because they are kind of complicated, especially for kids, like just knowing that like the way that they treat me hurts and I'm not really sure why, but it does. And then having this and being like, oh, this is why. This is because essentially it, this is this is villain type behavior. Oh, I had a question for you before we move into our other notes. We talked a lot about dreams, and so I'm curious for both you and the listeners, what are your dreams?
Huh.
Mm.
I have so many dreams. Um, I think my big dream, my big goal is to really grow Geeknasium. Um,
Mhm.
that's the dream. I would really love to just have a successful, I mean, it's already successful, so I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to downplay the success of
Mm.
Geeknasium, but I would like to have um many more abundance of nerds celebrating fitness in Geeknasium. Um, and I would like getting it into as many homes as possible and helping people who self-identify as nerdy or geeky or are into pop culture and fandom who might not identify as like a fitness person or relate that way to like going to the gym to feel empowered in fitness through Geeknasium. Like that's really a big, big goal and dream of mine, taking it to as many cons as possible,
Mm.
having as many live events as possible, and keeping the virtual with as many people all over the world as possible. So that's my big dream.
I love
What's
it.
yours?
It's a good question. I should really think about my own answers before I start asking these kinds
I
of
know you
questions.
asked me that question. I was like,
Uh,
okay.
um, I think very similarly to Rapunzel, I'm trying to figure out my new dream because for so long, for like the first 20 years of my life, my dream was to escape and find happiness. And I think in many ways, like start living my life or whatever. Also, side note, another thought I had was that when we feel stuck or trapped, it can feel like we aren't living our life. Like she has a whole song about when will my life begin. But it's also important to remember that like we are living right now, even if it's not the way or the situation we would like to be in. And trying to find like just those little things to, I don't want to say be grateful for because I have mixed feelings about pushing gratitude in those kinds of situations, but I do think just taking stock of kind of like what Rapunzel does in, having her hobbies and having her things that bring her joy. And luckily she has Pascal. But don't wait for X, Y, and Z to begin living your life. You're living right now. You are alive. So live it. Live your dream. Whatever dream that may be, even if you're trying to find it. So, going back to my own question, what is my dream? I definitely have also big entrepreneurial dreams about my coaching and my creative consulting that I've kind of put on pause for right now because of like personal things, but I have the fact that like this feeling hasn't ever gone away is a really good sign, but I am so passionate about helping other people who are kind of in the same boat with reparenting and perfectionism and just helping them unlearn a lot of like identify those limiting beliefs, unlearn them, and raise the volume on like that compassionate inner voice is a big passion of mine, as well as like creativity and artistry and things like that. I feel like there are so many people who don't think they're good enough to call themselves an artist or a creator or anything like that because it doesn't look like, there are these labels like musician or artist or photographer or, whatever label you want to use that feel so far out of reach because we're comparing ourselves to the musicians we see mainstream, like the big pop stars and stuff. Or, you know, that's really the only example that comes to mind right now, but helping people like reclaim those titles, just like if you create a thing, you are a creator. If you make art, you are an artist. And I know that it feels weird to try and accept and use those identifiers, but I really want to help people reclaim those, and I have a lot of big ideas about that. So those are my big entrepreneurial dreams. And then in my personal life, I think just stability and a regulated nervous system are my big short term dreams or goals, or I guess long term, because you always want to have a regulated nervous system. But yeah, I think and I feel like I'm jumping back and forth because before my dream was, to find happiness and stuff. And I'm very happy. I'm very happy with my life. I live with a great partner and we have amazing pets and fur babies. And like I'm like teenage me who just wanted to not try would be so amazed. Um and so a lot of like what I'm trying to do now is find a way to like honor her and myself. And I'm also in this like period of figuring out, as most people do, like what I want to do for the rest of my life. um but I'm no longer letting like traditional success or the material things kind of be the focus, because before I thought it was like, okay, I'll be happy when I graduate from college, I'll be happy when I get the big girl job, I'll be happy when I have my own apartment, things like that. And now I'm just letting it be like, what will am I happy? What will continue to add to my happiness? And what can I do to be happy? So anyway, very
Yeah, I
long
mean,
spiel about my
yeah.
dreams, but there we go.
There's a lot there, Marissa, but I want to say that especially for the listeners who just listen to all of that, is that the happiness is not a destination.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't arrive at happiness. Like you don't just wake up one day and you're like, I've accomplished all my goals, I'm happy now. Like happiness is a choice every day. And like, of course, there are certain situations where you may not be able to find the best happiness, like you were talking about before, but you can't wait for something to happen in order to decide that you will be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a big lesson that I had to learn very early on, because for me it was about finance. Like I'll be happy when I have my finances in order. I'll be happy when I can afford XYZ thing. And like living in New York is not easy. And so finances is not like being able to afford XYZ thing like is not necessarily where I will find happiness, because I choose to live here because I am happy living here, which
Mm-hmm.
makes the other goal of happiness harder, because it's like, oh, well, it's just financially difficult to live here doing what I do, XYZ, whatever. Once I started making the choice to like live a life that I enjoy, it's not that my life is easier, but it is that I am happier. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like I am happy. My life is hard, but I'm still happy. Um, and it's like those decisions that are like, I choose joy pretty much 99% of the time,
Yeah.
but also looking for reasons to be happy as well. Like you were saying, like you're not a fan of pushing gratitude, all that kind of thing. Less gratitude, more, what was the best thing that happened to me today? Me and my friend
Mm-hmm.
Jessica have been sharing this like one someone I follow on Instagram is doing this like lucky girl syndrome challenge, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like if you feel like a good thing, if a good thing happens to you every day, more good things will start happening to you. I don't know if that's true. It's like a quote unquote, like they call it the lucky girl syndrome, whatever.
Mhm.
But my friend Jessica and I took that, and because we're close, but we don't see each other every day or talk all the time, that we've just decided to start sharing with each other what was the best thing that happened to me today, or what was the best part of my day. And
Mm.
it's caused us to start looking out for that in every day. Like, oh, what it's time, it's the end of the day, or it's the next day in the morning. What was the best thing that happened to me yesterday? Um, because life is going to be hard regardless of anything, all the success in the world, quote unquote success, quote unquote,
Yeah.
whatever you've accomplished in life, life is still going to be hard.
Yeah.
And sometimes, in addition to sometimes the things that you've accomplished make life harder. Having a partner makes life harder. Reaching a certain financial milestone makes life harder. Every new goal you reach makes your life harder in a different way. So you still have to choose happiness in addition to living a life that is difficult.
Totally. Yes. And
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that up. Like the nuance with gratitude. I mean, I've created a gratitude checklist, and it's when we've grown up only hearing bad things about the world and bad things about ourselves, gratitude can be I don't want to say easy, but it can be a quote unquote easy way to stockpile some good things that will begin to outweigh the bad things. And especially when we may feel a little disheartened or discouraged in life, gratitude can be a nice way to be like, yeah, these are like some good things going my way. I also have like I created a little like journaling guide prompt thing that's like, identify 3 things that are going well and 3 things that may need to use some work. But it's important to acknowledge the both, and but also allow gratitude and those more positive, empowering, and supportive things to like be the um to be in the driver's seat more than just like the world sucks and everything is horrible and what's the point in trying. We
Mhm.
try because we end up maybe finding friends we didn't think we were going to, like you, HB, or there are so many beautiful things we have yet to experience, and I am looking forward to what those may be. So for you, the listeners, I we would love to know. We would love to hear from you what your dreams are. And also, I love what you said, HB. So I would also love to know, like, what's a good thing that's happened to you today, recently, this week, this month, or this year, even though right now we're filming in February, but I don't think this is coming out until late March, early April. Anyway, those are my thoughts and feels. Any other notes, HB?
I think the other things I wanted to bring up were like how like there were like little pieces throughout of Rapunzel using Mother Gothel's manipulation to sort of backfire on her. Like when she sends her mother to go get her favorite paint, I was
Mm,
like, oh, snap, that's a 3-day trip. She knew that she was getting rid of her for 3 days so that she could go on this adventure. Like Rapunzel, she's smart. And I think the other thing that we didn't really talk about, we don't really have to, I guess, but is just the fact that Mother Gothel stabs Flynn. Um, I was
straight up
like
stabs him.
straight up stabs him. But then yeah, apparently they took the blood off the blade so that it could still be PG, which I think is interesting.
They did. Yeah, you mentioned then like literally 5 seconds later, we see blood on Flynn. So I'm curious where the line is. Maybe it's like we can't have blood on the weapon, but we can have like hints of blood and
Like
violence
we can see his wound, but we just can't see blood on the object that caused the
that
wound.
caused the wound. Yeah, exactly.
So I was like, she just stabbed him? Okay.
Straight
Okay,
up.
Disney.
Yeah.
Um, but it's, I guess I was also shocked when Megara died in Hercules. I was like, oh, she's just dead now? Okay. All
Yeah.
right. And he just like dives into the underworld and gets her and almost dies himself. Like, that's not dark. Okay, Disney, whatever. But I guess we all know that Disney movies are quite dark. So,
They
um,
can be. Yeah, unexpectedly so.
yeah. I mean, with all the parents dying and whatnot, and animals being shot, and
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think I don't know what I think. I'm just thinking, I guess. I really enjoy this movie. I think it's great representation of what it can be like to pursue your dreams. A great representation of, getting out of a really bad situation.
Mhm.
Um, and I could go on a rant about the love story, but we don't have to do that. I
Yeah.
I I promise everyone, I promise I don't hate love. I just hate that the Lantern song, I think it should just be Rapunzel's song because it's her accomplishing her dream. I do not think that it needed to be a love song and a duet that they
Well,
needed to
okay,
kiss at
hang
the end.
on. Okay, wait. Now I'm like kind of want to get into this. Not like into it, but I think it was important for it to be a duet because of Flynn's dream. And I think this entire time, Flynn has also had this dream of being seen for who he is and not this persona he's had to put on to survive, essentially, right? Because he was like an orphan. He grew up poor. He like didn't have much. And so he saw this as a way of like getting all the things that he wanted. Um, and his big dream of like living in on an island alone. What did he say? On an island, tan and rested and alone, surrounded by enormous piles of money. Like that's the dream he says, but I don't think it's his actual dream. And I think it is finding someone who not only knows his real name and knows who he is, but appreciates him and doesn't run away from him. So that is my argument as to why I love that it's a duet. I love that it's a ballad because both of their dreams are coming true. So
That's fine. They both of their dreams can come true, I
and
guess. They don't need to be in love. End of
and
story.
they
No, I'm
don't
just
need
kidding.
it to. Well, I mean, if we do want to talk about the whole love thing, like she's what, she just turned 18 and he's maybe 25, 26.
Do we know how old he is?
I don't think they ever outrightly say, but the man's got like a goatee and is obviously very,
18-year-olds have goatees.
yeah, this is
I don't
true.
know. Okay. We're obviously
Anyway,
we'll talk more about this. I'll rant more about hating love in the music episode, I guess.
if you also want to shit on love with HP, join us on Patreon, where we're gonna break down the soundtrack and hate on some love songs, but that's
Listen,
fine.
okay, I don't hate love. I just wish they did it differently, okay?
Fair. That's fair. I think before we wrap up, my only other note or thought was because I forgot about this. We were chatting obviously during the movie, and you asked, like why hasn't she tried running away before, or has she ever tried, or I'm surprised she hasn't. And to anyone who also feels stuck or feels like, I can't try or I have tried and it didn't go well, I just want to like acknowledge and validate that the fear of punishment or the fear of consequences might be greater than the desire to be free. And that's why it can feel so hard to leave toxic and unsafe environments. Because, like I said before, our brains crave what is known and predictable, and the unknown is scary. So, I just want to validate anyone's like fear or trepidations about trying to do things differently because it is scary. It can be scary. And it's okay that it's scary. I think when we do the thing scared, it can be really powerful and liberating, but we won't know until we try. And so I think that's like one of my favorite messages or takeaways from this movie is that we sometimes just have to try. We might not have it all figured out right away or have a perfect plan. Things might not go to plan, like we've talked about in pretty much every single episode so far. And that we may have to adapt, and it's going to be scary. And we don't have to do it alone because I think, earlier I asked about Flynn and if we consider her like a damsel in distress or whatever, but I think sometimes it's important and a great reminder that sometimes while we do have the power within ourselves to change our lives, it can be easier when we have people in our lives encouraging and supporting us and reminding us that we're not alone on this journey. So, to all you beautiful listeners, HB and I just want to remind you, you are seen, you are heard, and you are not alone.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it for this episode. Again, you can email us at mhm.thepodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear about your dreams and any good things that have happened to you. And the links to connect with us are in the show notes. And we will talk to you next time.
Yeah. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mental Health Multiverse podcast and for spending time with us, HB and LB. Special shout out to our musical composer, Little HB.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, feel free to share it with others, post about it on social media, leave a rating and review, or become an exclusive Patreon member to see bonus and additional content.
To stay up to date on all things MHM, you can follow us on Instagram at Heather Bodie and at littlebin_notbroken, or subscribe to our YouTube channel to see our faces and watch some fun bloopers. You can find all of these links in the show notes.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.